Should be live now.
All right, now we should be live. All right, welcome to the table, Rhiannon and Hannah. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So this policy was originally recommended to Council to be developed by the Waste Advisory Group in line with some work that they have got done in terms of ensuring greater transparency of the availability of the service and how it operates. It was consulted alongside fees and charges. We had a number of submissions on the policy, which Hannah is going to speak through in a moment. I will just touch on the number of submissions made by residents around extension of curbside waste services, particularly for Millwood Glen. So that's something that Council can consider as part of the long-term plan process and changing any levels of service in relation to that. So I will just pass to Hannah to touch briefly on the consultation.
Thank you. I'll take the report as read. I'll just highlight a couple of points. Firstly, to note that most of the submitters who indicated a position on this policy didn't actually provide any reasons, or they didn't make any substantive comments. Therefore, the analysis concentrates on the substantive comments. I'll also note that a number of comments were made that weren't directly relevant to the policy and what was being consulted on. That included comments which related to the curbside waste consultation that happened last year and that was heard at the beginning of the year, or other matters that were outside the scope of the policy. On some of the more substantive points, I'll also just reiterate that this policy is largely intended to codify existing practice. It's not really introducing anything new. One substantive point that was made was around the weight limit for the bins. As has been previously advised, this is based on contract rather than being a new thing for this policy. And the other more substantive point that has led to a recommendation for a change is around the timing for people putting their bins out. So the original policy said essentially you had to put your bin out between midnight and 7 a.m. on the day of collection. There are reasons for this, including minimising the risk of bins being blown over or someone stealing the bins or interfering with them. However, based on the submissions, it is a fair and reasonable point that does not suit everybody, and therefore we are recommending changing the time that you put your bin out to 9 p.m. the day before, and then before 7 a.m. again on the date of collection. So that has a couple of changes in the policy to reflect that, but otherwise no further changes are recommended.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Does anyone have any questions to the policy?
The question with regards to the 9 p.m, it's where possible, is that correct? Yeah, where possible.
Through you, Chair, yes, and there is a line in there to say that we're still encouraging people to put it out on the day of collection where possible, and again trying to reduce the risk of bins getting blown over or interfered with, but recognising that that won't suit everybody.
Councillor De Vries.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of things. I'll follow up from Councillor Ty McNaughton as well, just around that policy. So we're not actually out monitoring bins that are out at, earlier or late, are we? So this is just guidance on best practice.
To my knowledge, that's correct. Yes, we're not monitoring it, but it has that. The other section that's affected is when people, if someone were to get in touch with council and say that their bin had been lost or stolen, it sort of gives us an answer. If someone's been putting their bin out a couple of days before, that's a very different situation to it happening on the day.
Yes, I just wonder if it's easier to just write, 12 hours out before 7 a.m. So it's 12 hours either side. Easy, because it's probably not a big deal, but I just feel like we're being really particular on this point that it's not even being monitored. So it just feels a bit haphazard to me. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to note was around the Millwood Glen suggestion and noting that there was quite a number of Millwood Glen residents that had requested services to the area. And so the recommendation talks about this possibly going into the long-term plan if we choose it to, but it doesn't need to do that. We could just, scope out this cost of that service being provided there and then make a decision or an operational decision. Does it always need to go through the LTP?
It would have to go through either an LTP or an annual plan in terms of changing the service. And so at the moment, it is not within the long-term plan to extend the service, and it wasn't when we reviewed last year. What this policy is doing is essentially giving people a mechanism by which to request council to consider it. So you're not making a decision, obviously, you're just noting that there are a number of residents that wish you to consider it, and so I'm just saying we can do that as part of the long-term planning process.
I've got a quick question. Sorry, it is around the Millwood Glen situation there as well, with the 11 submissions from specifically just Millwood Glen. So how many homes are in Millwood Glen, or do you think that they kind of all banded together and were like, look, this would be a really good idea now to...
59.
Hey? Yeah, 59.
I asked the residents.
Yeah, 59. Brilliant. Cool. It's quite a significant portion then. Awesome. Councillor Bond.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the question of, given the submitters from Milford Glen came back and gave us a preference, would it usually sit inside, is this an all package for that to be considered under the policy to sit inside and then recommend it go to LTP?
Well, how should I best answer that? So we haven't had a policy before, so I can't say whether it will be normal, because we just haven't had a policy, which is, this is intended to provide greater clarity. It simply gives one mechanism. You'll recall, Councillor, that when we had the consultation last year, which Hannah mentioned around the service and the types of bins, there were some people also submitting through that, saying that they would like bins and they're not currently covered. So all of that information, as well as this information, would be brought to you as councillors to consider. Do you want to consider extending the service? Obviously, that is not something you can do overnight. It requires contract development and consultation on extending the service, which we can, or which we have the option to do.
Your question?
Yeah, just another little wee one. So on page 4 of the policy, just following up from that, it has criteria set out for 1, 2, 3, 4 areas of consideration must be given for new areas to receive our bin service. Am I understanding it right that currently Millwood Glen satisfy 2 out of the 4?
So I guess the conversations that we've had with the relevant teams would be, they would be recommending a much broader area if you do want to consider extending the service. They would not recommend one community on that scale. There is nothing practical getting in the way of that community not being served, for example, distance and other things which can affect some areas. But if you wish to consider service extension, it would probably be a lot broader. And that would also take into account those communities that raised, or those members of those communities that raised it through that last consultation as well.
Final one. Something slightly different. Just in the policy on page 7, on the top sentence there, have we had to actually do this, which is to immediately remove any approved containers or suspend the service in extreme circumstances? Is that on the rise for us, or have we not seen a rise?
We'd have to take that question away.
Thank you.
All right. Well, there being no further questions, we have some recommendations in front of us. First, that we received the report. So I'll have a mover for that, please. Councillor Bond, seconded Councillor De Vries. All those in favour?
Aye.
Second being the social media report and submissions. Can I have a, thank you, Councillor Ludlow, seconded Mayor Campbell. All those in favour?
Aye.
Noting the submissions made by residents of Millwood Glen requesting an extension for the area. Noting that. Moved Councillor Ludlow, seconded Councillor Bond. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
And this is where we come to a crossroads. Either we approve the curbside waste services policy as we have consulted on, or Plan B, we approve with the following changes. Has anybody got a strong preference on A or B?
I'll move 4B, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mayor Campbell. We have a motion on the floor for 4B with striking out 4A. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you very much, Councillor Ludlow. Is there any questions? Any discussion on that? All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. And then we have a recommendation to Council to adopt the wider policy. I'll move that. Seconded Councillor Bond. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. That was almost too easy. All right, the next paper that we have is tab 7, which is Southland Commercial Accommodation Findings.
So through you, Chair, Bobby Brown had to leave, so I have got her notes if you would like me to give you a short verbal update. But please be kind and don't ask any difficult questions because I probably won't be able to answer them. So this is around the Murihiku Southland Commercial Accommodation update for the previous year. This review is done by Great South because it's important to understand the value of visitors to the region, including length of stay and spend while they are here, also within the broader context of the housing challenges. Overall, across the whole region, there are 279 operators. There's been very little change. Within our district, there's been 1 new hotel, 1 motel closed, and 1 camping ground closed. We have 21% of the wider region stock, and that camping ground closing is part of a broader trend. There have been a few others also closed within the district. Some good news are increasing number of businesses serving the trade tourism sector. So these are products which are sold through as packages through travel agents. So it's a really good way of promoting the region to international visitors. There are 22 new products in the last year. Many of those are within the wider Southland district, which potentially benefits Invercargill as a gateway. Commercial occupancy is down slightly. That's just mirroring the weak domestic market. However, we have a broader increase in occupancy within accommodation within Invercargill, which is good news, and that does include obviously the new hotel that's come online, so it's good to see that that hasn't dropped occupancy across the wider sector as a whole. Those figures are averaged, so it's not possible to say which particular properties would be impacted. And I think the last thing that it's worth noting is that we are, as a market, becoming less seasonal. So that is good in terms of general occupancy across those shoulder seasons.
Thank you, Councillor Ludlow.
Just happy to move the 3 recommendations, Chair.
I'm happy to second those alongside you. I do have a quick question before we do. I guess when it comes to, I think it's really excellent that we have this data, but from my perspective, I'm also looking for the what next. What actually comes from the fact that we know where the slumps are, or how much occupancy that we have, or what times that we don't have the occupancy, and bits and pieces like that. So what I would love to see from Great South is what is that destination strategy piece, and I know we've had that workshop previously around events and such. So how does it all work together is what I'd like to say. Were there any further questions? Councillor De Vries?
Just slightly to your point, because my questions were for Bobby were going to be around, what can be done to facilitate more investment in Bluff, around accommodation options. Who doesn't love to visit Bluff? So, and I think with the number of aquaculture developments and things coming online, it would be interesting to see what that next step is from this data.
And she was absolutely happy to receive questions, so I can take those away for her.
Thank you very much, Rhiannon. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried. All right. Now we have tab 8, Intersection Improvements Program. Welcome. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, councillors and Chair. Report I'd just like to take in as read, but just a couple of points I think are probably worth bringing forward. This report's been prepared, obviously, with the following the presentation from James Hargis Junior College in Queen's Drive, and I guess what we saw, that was a greater opportunity to actually expand a little bit and actually show some of the benefits across the wider network that we have. We have developed a program for your consideration that takes into account those areas and some wider areas, and we have, evaluated those. Councillors might have seen a report in the press in the last couple of weeks where they've highlighted Isabella Street as one of the top worst 6 intersections in the South Island, so I guess that also validates some of our findings as well. Each of the intersections have, opportunities, and it's a little bit subjective, but it does give us an opportunity to develop and deliver a wider program. So Grant and I are happy to take some questions.
Mayor Campbell.
Am I right in thinking that if we do the 3 that are listed in recommendation 3, we have a budget, I think it says somewhere in the paper, 1.5 million. Those 3 together come to about 1.3. So they can be done within budget. So if we agree these 3 today, it has no impact on rates next year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Excellent question, and noting too there that further throughout the reports, the cost estimates for the one on Layard Street was quite considerably more expensive than the other 3. We can almost get all 3 done within a profile for the previous one. I've now got Councillor Stewart and Councillor De Vries.
Yes, as far as I don't see anywhere in this list at the lights at South City with right turns going into Janet Street, I think it is, and going the other way. I'm a resident of South City, and I've seen so many near accidents because drivers go up to the lights and then turn their indicators on. Cars are trying to get past them. There's other ones going in the same lane. I see it all the time. It's just, is there any rule where we can say no right turn on Ellis Road?
Whole of Ellis Road.
Lights at South City.
Janet and Martin.
Russell, yeah.
Through you, Chair, we can ban specific turns, but we would just need to look at how, the traffic flows. What I think I'm hearing is that we've got some driver behaviour that we would want to try to correct, but the ability of the current signal set to control which turns is there. We could have limit a turn if that was, in the best interest of the wider network, and some of that's driver behaviour that we would probably want to try to encourage to change.
Councillor De Vries, Councillor Dermody, then Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, Russell, appreciate the report that you've been done here, and I just want to get your expertise. And if the Queen's Drive pedestrian crossing goes ahead outside of Hargest, will that in effect have some positive flow on around the congestion that's happening at Layard Street and Queen's Drive anyway, because the traffic is stopping, further down the road already? Do you think that way?
Chris, I'll get Grant to offer some expertise.
Yeah, it might introduce what we would call in the industry a platooning type effect, but and that's where you have groups of cars stopping and moving through intersections, so creating gaps in traffic. I think in this case, those effects would probably be quite limited given the distance between the intersection and that pedestrian crossing, and the times at which various bits of the network are busy. For example, if you're trying to undertake a right turn out of the site, out of Layard Street, you've still got traffic coming from the left, which would still be quite challenging to try and enter at peak times. So you might get some benefit from traffic coming from your right, but not from your left. So I think that there's still other parts of that intersection which would be fairly well loaded up at peak times when you see that traffic. And I'm a regular user of that intersection as well. So.
Yes, same. I'd like to find another way to go at different times during the day.
Herbert Street.
Yeah, Moana Street.
Absolutely.
No, I guess, so if we were to proceed with the recommendation of that pedestrian crossing, and then in another few years think about doing the Layard intersection, do they cancel each other out? Like, would you then in effect have to undo the pedestrian crossing?
I might answer that one, Grant. I would suggest that's correct. We wouldn't preclude in the future having to consider signalising Layard Street and either incorporating the pedestrian crossing or removing it and the pedestrians using the intersection. I guess the greatest benefit would be to signalise the intersection because there are many positives, but the cost and the difficulty of doing so, I think, and I guess that's why we've put that as the recommendation, is to do signalise the pedestrian crossing first, and then actually, if the intersection continues to I guess have issues, then we would need to readdress it. Things like the controllers and bits and pieces would be reusable, so long as they're at the end of not at the end of their life. So all the costs aren't lost. There'll be some sunk costs, but the early benefits are definitely for the pedestrian crossing.
Councillor Dermody, you were next, and Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the paper. And clearly the Yarra Street, Isabella Street warrants investment based on the data there around incidents, doesn't it? I like the approach of doing the Queen's Drive signalling of the pedestrian crossing as a starter, other than probably at key times during the day, which are probably between 8:30 and 9, and then between sort of 2:45 and 3:30, that intersection probably works pretty reasonably. It's just when you load it up with all that traffic coming from the 2 or 3 schools that are in the area, which people probably know that's going to happen anyway, so they do probably slow down and, police themselves sufficiently. I'm supportive of the proposal and like the data that supports the investment decision.
Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. Russell, like others have said, your report's been really good. It's good to see the project summary versus the crash cycle of those areas that you've identified. And along with what Councillor Dermody said about the pedestrian signals would work quite appropriately. I've got a question similar to Barry's, but which is a bit different. But the Queen's Drive, Tweed Street roundabout lanes going into whether you're going to turn left onto Tweed Street, whether you're going to go straight through onto Ellis Road, or whether you're going to turn right onto Tweed Street. What's that particular situation like in terms of crashes? Because, like you've alluded to, sometimes it's driver manoeuvring that causes unbelievable things that you see in front of you, but people can't decide whether they're going left, right, or straight. So has that been something that's come up on the peripheral or on the data as being an issue?
This is one of Grant's specialties.
To be fair, there are plenty of crashes there, but most of them are non-injury or minor crashes, and that's really a function of how roundabouts operate. The energies and the speeds involved in crashes at roundabouts are a lot different than what they are at just a normal crossroads intersection. And it's also a function of just the pure volume of traffic using that intersection as well. The more volume of traffic you have going through an intersection, of course your crash rates are going to be higher.
I mean, the only reason why I asked that is because I've looked at the crash profiles and wondered if that was climbing, given seeing regularly the issues coming in and manoeuvring out of that roundabout.
Through the chair, we continue to monitor those intersections, and we've also contemplated, I guess, the scope of works that you would need to change a roundabout to a set of signalised intersections, and whether you actually get the benefits necessary. So we keep watching. Better driver behaviour would actually be great.
Yes.
The
Good luck on
ability,
that.
ability to drive roundabouts is something that I guess our education programs continues to want to focus on. So,
Thank you.
Campbell.
So speaking of roundabouts, further to Councillor Bond's question, I mean, I've had approaches from people who ask me about the height of the undergrowth there. Not only that roundabout, but other ones too. And I know that there's a policy actually to have that because it reduces visibility and that prevents people just running straight onto the roundabout. That's my understanding. Can you just confirm that is actually a policy? One roundabout that I've been particularly pulled up about is the one as you approach the airport, where there are very large trucks using that now because they use the bypass. And one truck driver raised with me the fact that they need more time to pull out, and they simply so they've got to be able to see over the roundabout, but they cannot because of the height of the undergrowth. But my understanding is that that's intentional. I just wonder the extent to which we have. Is that actually a council policy?
So it's not a policy as far as I'm aware, but there are engineering guidelines that we would normally apply to roundabouts. You're right, there is a balance between providing enough visibility so you can see someone on a roundabout to undertake a movement safely, but not so much visibility that people will just blast through without slowing because they can see 300 metres down the road. So there is a bit of a balancing act. The roundabout, certainly on the way to the airport that you've mentioned, is one that I've worked with the parks team a little bit on recently to reduce some of the growth that's in there. It had become quite overgrown, and that was something that parks recognised, so I've been talking with them to try and reduce that. And there was some feedback from the heavy haulage not association, but truck drivers, that it was getting a little bit overgrown and out of hand through there. So something we're absolutely working on.
Any further questions or discussion? No? All right. Well, we have some recommendations in front of us here. I think that it's pretty clear which way we will go. All right, Councillor Ludlow, are you moving them all together as a block?
I would love to, Chair.
I'm happy to second.
Second, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mayor Campbell. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yeah, and actually on that note, thank you very much. Excellent outcome from Public Forum, and I can't wait to be able to let Christine from James Hargis know that we've taken action. Excellent. Well, thank you. Next, we have you both back again for the intersection improvements for Calvin Street and Victoria Avenue. Take us through the report.
thanks, Chair. Once again, take the report as read. What we focused on was really the scope of this report was looking at that intersection and not necessarily, I guess, some of that internal travel. We have reviewed the intersection and we think there are some potential for some improvements before the museum opens. I think that's quite an opportunity. And we've also highlighted that we have some budget that we can apply there. Predominantly what we're seeing is that the use of that intersection obviously hasn't been used during the construction to the same extent. So some of our crash rates will be a little bit affected by that because the traffic flow in and out is just really construction. But once again, with some changes there, the intersection will trend towards being more of a T intersection, and therefore there will be periods where there has the potential to be busier, but there's lots of periods when that intersection will flow quite nicely, and it's only those times when the car park, I guess, empties all in one rush, and it is the peak time in Invercargill. So, the car park, as I understand it, will also serve the wider park, so it won't always be event driven. So, happy to take some questions.
My first question is, Russell, can you please tell us what's changed in the proposed car park layout from the one that's provided in the diagram? Because I think the way that it's accessed has somewhat evolved since that diagram. Okay, on page 5, yeah, the proposed car park layout.
Through the Chair, our understanding is the car park is simply serviced off the Victoria Avenue, I guess, extension, recognising that the road does a little bit weird thing there and stops. So part of it's reserve and part of it's road, but that doesn't, in essence, change the way the public perceive it. So in terms of our suggestion, it's really nothing inside the car park. It's designed by consultants associated with the museum. We're dealing with the intersection at Victoria Avenue and Calvin Street.
Okay, so given that the primary access coming into the car park will be through the Victoria Avenue piece, you won't be able to access the car park from the Gala Street end?
My understanding from the project is that it has some levels of access, but that's not necessarily the intended primary access.
Councillor Bond, Mayor Campbell, then Councillor Bond.
Given this is work that's necessitated by Te Anua, will it be capitalised as part of the museum project?
Through the Chair, I'm suggesting that it's undertaken through a minor safety improvement through roading.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bond, then Councillor Dermody.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's kind of a supplementary from Councillor Crackett's, because when I looked at the map or the concept layout on page 5, and I can see where the entrance is through Victoria Ave, but we also have further on down Gala Street, the entrance and exit subsequently where the lights are, where the intersection is, and then down further. So is that over this, I'm useless at my directions, I'm sorry, I'll be honest.
Everon Street, I think you're talking about.
Yeah. So are they still staying as they are, and is it just the concept layout plan that we've viewed? Because I found even that was quite confusing, that it's only going to change down that end, and then there's a section coming onto Gala Street in that layout concept that is boarded off and no one can enter and exit. I'm wondering why is the access restricted predominantly in the layout to Victoria Street when there's other areas as well?
Through the Chair, my apologies if we've confused you with the drawings.
Yeah.
This car park sits within the reserve and has no direct vehicle access to Gala Street. All access is from Victoria Avenue. So if you understand where the Jessie Calder Gardens are
Yes.
and those sorts of areas,
Yeah.
so it's going into that Victoria Avenue piece, and then it joins onto Calvin Street. It has a link back to the main entrance to the park, but that's not necessarily, as I understand it, seen as the predominant access, much in the same way that the museum previously was connected to the park. It's what I understand here is they're building a bigger car park of 85 car parks, and that's going to put extra load as they, I guess, come in to a lesser extent, but certainly when they exit, if they exit in a group, and that's really puts pressure on the intersection at Victoria Avenue and Calvin Street, and that's the problem that we're solving, along with, as we note in the paper, the pedestrian. If you walk to the park from Calvin Street, you get to a really quite tight place in the left turn, and the plan is to work with parks and work through that as a solution to redirect that pedestrian access so it's safer.
Yeah, on that note, people do come from the Calvin Street end through that slip lane onto Gala quite quickly. And it's also the pedestrian connection from Calvin across over past the slip lane. And the number of times that I've seen people, it's meant to be a giveaway, people, but the amount of times I've seen people slip through there so rapidly when you've got people trying to walk across. So wonder that there hasn't been more people hit there. So as the plan, and I guess I would have liked to see a potential ideation of or a map of what the new proposed layout would look like, because are we going to shift that pedestrianisation further down, or how is that all going to continue to interconnect?
Yeah, so one of the ideas that we've had some discussion about is shifting the pedestrian desire line across the left turn slip lane further up the slip lane, because where it is at the moment is essentially forcing pedestrians to cross in front of a vehicle that's looking toward the road to look for a gap to actually turn left. And so what that creates is a situation where the driver's not necessarily focusing on people who are crossing, particularly from the driver's left, where there's vegetation which blocks into visibility as well. So ideally, again, we'd like to, we're proposing to work with our parks team to find the best crossing point for pedestrians, and potentially look at have that crossing point as a raised table as well, so it really slows traffic for people crossing in that location.
Sorry, Chair, just to add a little bit to that, we have looked at this in the past, and really we need to tie this much better in with the parks paths and the traffic signals. We've got that gap. That's what it is. So we know we have a pretty good understanding how to work together. Now with the car park is the ideal time to align those and correct it.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thank you. In the layout concept plan, we've got 5 metre long stalls. Is that making provisions for camper vans with those parks?
Through the Chair, we haven't designed this. That's a question we could refer to the project, but they would appear to be short if there would be a park. Reasonably short if you're a camper van.
Sure.
If they're related to the report.
It's in front of me. I'm taking questions from that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. It's a concept layout that's there. So on page 4, under turning movements from Victoria Avenue, I see that there's been some recommendations through the report of what could be an alternative, and I'm just it says that there could be a stop sign, and I'm just wary of the fact that coming in and out of that area, as it is today, it's quite hard to see past, say, if people are actually parking on the yellow lines, camper vans, which they do, and SUVs. You've got to enter in past Calvin Street halfway on our lane to actually turn right before you can see if you're clear to turn. So looking at your recommendations, I can see that will actually substantially decrease the potential accidents coming in when you're turning right. So are you looking at taking away a right-hand turn from there as well, if I'm understanding this right?
Through the Chair, the turns that we would limit are the ones, I guess, from the traffic that's coming from the D Street end. So as you would come out from the proposed car park, you would be able to turn left or right. We would restrict a through traffic. But if you're coming from the D Street end, which is predominantly car parks, we can certainly bring a plan back. But what we're doing is really trying to create at that intersection a controlled T intersection as best we can, so that the priority is really given to those people exiting the car park.
Thank you very much. Any further? Councillor Dermody?
Thanks, Chair. I have a few concerns about this plan. There will be a significant increase in pedestrian traffic if that's our way from the museum back to town or from town to the museum. So, it's a very difficult intersection to negotiate, and when we put people that may not be as familiar with the traffic system in Invercargill as perhaps others are, we're putting people's lives in danger, I would have thought. The second piece is in Gala Street and Devon, we've got a controlled intersection there with traffic lights. Why would we not use that as the main entrance and exit to the park? So it's a controlled entry and exit. We don't have a controlled entry and exit into the museum going through the Victoria Avon Way. It's up to how people go through intersections, and in the previous paper we've just found out that people actually struggle with intersections, T-intersections, and this has got traffic coming from 4 or 5 ways plus a heap of pedestrians.
Through the Chair, that's a question we can refer back to both the museum project and parks, because really that's an internal mechanism. What we've been addressing is when you attach to the network, which is at the intersection, and that's an existing intersection that we would want to do, whether that was the only access or the predominant access. So certainly happy to address that as part of our design works, but at the moment the proposal, as I understand it from within the mechanism, is also to have the buses that would drop people off at the museum use that piece out into Victoria Avenue as well, to Calvin Street.
It's to the danger, doesn't it then, when you've got big buses coming out of there and you've got busy traffic going through, so why would you not put them through a controlled intersection?
Or you could limit it so it's left turn only. That's your alternatives.
It doesn't make sense to me, and given the previous paper where we're saying traffic lights, you know, with Isabella Street and so forth, are the way to control high movement areas, and we're stepping away from this and putting a lot of people through an uncontrolled intersection.
Councillor De Vries.
Thank you. A little bit to that, because one of the questions I had was what directional signage is being used to show where the main entrance is, and I didn't know if that really fell within the scope of the improvements you're making here, but it was a question that I had, and I think that goes to Councillor Dermody's point, is human behaviour, right, will just do what it's going to do, and I think that a lot of people would think, a lot of locals at least, would think that the main entrance will be through the Devon Street lights and around the circle there. But I think it's important to look at that exit. I think a left-hand turn is a great idea, but...
Alrighty, any further discussion? No further questions? All right, we have some recommendations here. The first is to receive the report. Happy with moving that. Thank you, Councillor Bond. Seconder, Councillor De Vries. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. All right, the second one is that we are noting that it is expected, the traffic is expected to increase throughout the Calvin Street and Victoria intersection. Moved Councillor De Vries. Seconded Councillor Bond. All those in favour? Third, that we're noting all of these design considerations. Moved Councillor Ludlow. Seconded Councillor De Vries. All those in favour? And the same two are going to move recommendation of,
Just through yourself, Chair, recommendation 4 actually needs to be altered in some shape or form because it's pointing to a paper that's not part of this report. Just as you're now up to that one.
I think was it meant to note from the previous paper? Is that right?
It is in there, yeah.
From the intersection improvements program.
Technically, it's not consistent because it's referring to what paper?
And would it be the previous intersection improvements program paper?
It could state that. It needs to be a slightly more specific, or just say stop at the council point.
Yeah, all right, we'll do that. Cool, thank you. So the recommendation changed now that the physical works identified are funded by council, which we have just previously spoken about. Thank you very much for moving, Councillor Ludlow. Seconded, Councillor Bond. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. And that brings us to the end of our 2nd of June infrastructure meeting. Thank you very much, everybody who joined us on the